And if somebody stands in front of you and says something that sounds like something you thought to yourself 20 years ago, that can be very disturbing. And I think that's one of the reasons why people find it so upsetting.
In my opinion, this homosexual is a kind of disease, or something which a man is being born, which got something to do with the hormones.
Let them get on with what they want to do, provided it doesn't turn them into lunatics and makes them go out and shoplift or murder or steal or something like this, provided the rest of their life is normally lived.
Well, I don't think it's a natural thing to be. I said it. A man is a man and a woman's a woman. If it meant to be gay people, well, then men would have babies.
You're not used to it, are you? If you're not that way yourself, then you're just not used to it.
Would you feel threatened if your best friend said that they were gay?
Yeah.
This programme isn't like the other programmes so far in this series, because the people I talk to, the two main people, don't really have a problem. No, the people with the problem are you. That is, if you're at all like those in the street who said that they regarded homosexuality as an illness, a perversion, unnatural. Well, it's none of those things. Homosexuality is just another form of human loving that some people experience and some choose to make the basis of their lifestyle. And yet, so many homosexuals are made desperately unhappy because of the unjust and cruel attitudes of ordinary people that they meet. And that's 20 years after the change in the law that made homosexuality legal.
For the purposes of this evening, it's this way. The pictures of naked young women are fun. In Penthouse and Playboy, page 3 of The Sun. There's no nudes in Gay News or One magazine, but they still find excuses to call it obscene. Read how disgusting we are in the press, in the Evening News and the Sunday Express. Molesters of children, corrupters of youth. It's there in the paper, it must be the truth.
Tom Robinson is a songwriter whose music has helped to expose the continuing persecution which homosexuals still suffer, and he's done much to provide gay people with a positive sense of identity. I asked him how he had come to question the nature of his own sexuality.
At first, it felt okay, like being 9 years old and in with the lads and everything. But it gradually dawns on you over between 9 and 13 that you're feeling about the other lads in a way that they aren't necessarily feeling about you. And as from 13 onwards, everybody else appears to start getting interested in the opposite sex. You do too. I mean, I started going out with girls and having this sort of totally bogus relationships, and also putting down the effeminate boys at school. You know, I blush to say it now, but you do. You do everything possible to try and prove that you're not like that. You learn to hate queers before you find out you are one. And the one thing we have is the possibility to hide it. And the process of stopping hiding is called coming out. You just simply, you're open about your life.
Well, what is the best way of coming out?
I tell you what I found about coming out. A much less painful way than going up to people and saying, "Oh, look, I think there's something I ought to tell you about myself." And getting them all embarrassed and ready for it, and you all embarrassed and sort of, is simply to stop lying. That's the simplest way to do it, is to just not tell any more lies. And if your parents say, "When are you going to get married?" say, "I don't know. I'm not entirely sure I'm going to get married." And if they want to push it a stage further and ask the next question, they can. But if they're sort of already suspecting or feeling uneasy about it, they won't ask any further. And then the next day, they might ask something else, a little question that would just have us, and you just answer that straight. And gradually, you can come out much more painlessly at a speed that you can cope with and that they can cope with, rather than having these heart-rending confessions that may, in any case, not be the whole story.
Tom stopped lying at the age of 23 after he discovered that there were other people who were prepared to be open about their feelings?
I moved to London and discovered through a guide to alternative London that there was such a thing as a gay pub, and I went along there and I found there was a thing called gay news being sold at it, and I gradually discovered that there was a whole community going on there, and there were all these wonderful looking people walking in off the street into these pubs and ordering drinks and everything, openly homosexual, and people weren't standing outside the pub throwing bricks at them or going so I thought, well, you know, why not? Nothing to lose, living in a strange city, nobody knows me. And I met another young man that I settled down with and lived with, and eventually time came when I wanted to go home. I called up my dad and said, can I come home, visit? I said, fine. I said, can I bring somebody with me? He said, do you want one bed or two? And again, it was one of those things. He knew, I think, long before I did, that I was probably more attracted to boys than to girls.
What was his reaction, though? I mean, he gave you permission to come out, but what do you think he was really feeling?
I think there's an element always at least of disappointment, because quite often one's parents are heterosexual.
Quite often.
and so naturally they can't feel as good about you being gay. Even if they were the most liberated people in the world, they would like you to be like them. They'd like to have grandchildren, whatever. And so the best you can hope for is a mild disappointment swallowed and on the basis of their love for you. And the worst you can get, of course, is, where did I go wrong? What have we done to bring you, you know, I wish I'd never brought you into the world, that kind of thing, which can happen. But generally, instead of one's family going, goodness, our little Johnny is one of those nasty queers, or our little Sarah is one of those nasty diesel dykes, what happens is they change their idea about what a diesel dyke or a nasty queer is when they find out that little Johnny and little Sarah is one.
Can we come back to your own experience? One of the problems homosexual people may have is settling down into a permanent, stable relationship the way heterosexual people do.
The thing is, with the heterosexual, things like people I've seen who got married, there's a lot of pressures on them to stay together. In fact, not only things like the children turning up and think about the children, but also when you've gone through and told all your parents and everybody you're getting married and you've gone through the ceremony and you've actually made a huge investment in that way of life, which you then got to de-invest if you want to break up.
So the point you're trying to make is that homosexual relationships are...
Quite the reverse. There's a lot of pressure on us to break up. There are no financial advantages to staying together, like married allowances. It's hard to get council housing together, for instance. You don't have the bond of children. Quite often the relationship is conducted in secret, and so you don't have all the friends and people that you'd have to tell if you were going to split up. So there's an absence of pressures to keep you together, for one thing. So perhaps you don't see it through and make such a thoroughgoing go of it as perhaps heterosexual marriages might do. I think it's more to do with the psychology of men and women anyway, regardless of their sexuality, that leads to gay men breaking apart more readily. And that is to do with the fact that men like casual sexual encounters. They're more able to divorce their sexuality from their emotions than women are. Because with a gay male relationship, you have that kind of sexuality meeting that kind of sexuality. It's much easier, actually, for gay men to have casual relationships and casual sex than it is for heterosexual men to have them. And the plus point of that, of course, is that you don't get the wounded party in quite the same way, that Jack the Lad, Casanova type heterosexual men are constantly telling lies to women in order to get them into bed and giving them false promises and things and letting them down. It's actually quite an attacking way of being with women, that sort of very, very promiscuous heterosexuality. Whereas promiscuous gay men are with each other they're exploiting each other mutually. There isn't the same kind of victim position in it. I think that's an advantage.
Can I come back to you now?
Yes, sorry.
No, it's all right. Don't say that. You've had relationships with men over the years since you came out, which is what, about, how long, 10, 12 years now?
It's 10 years.
10 years. Have you had friendships with women?
After I came out as gay and identified myself as being homosexual, I found that relationships with women became much easier, just generally making friends with them. But also, curiously enough, I found that sexually, I was more attracted to women after releasing the gay side of me. It's when you've got that all bottled up inside you can't look at any of the other part of your personality because you're obsessed with that. According to Kinsey, according to a report published in America in 1949, which is a long time ago, sexuality just goes on an even scale. You've got people who are completely heterosexual here, who are very, very rare. And that most people who go through their lives as heterosexuals also have an aspect to their personality where they are also interested in the same sex. And at the other end, you've got gay people who are only interested in their own sex. And in between, you've got the rest of us. And it's just a matter for how things turn out, which you actually prefer on balance, on scale. But no, it's very, very odd that in recent years, I've found myself to be bisexual, which I never suspected, through having been much more loose and open about being homosexual in the first place.
Tom, are there a lot of false notions that heterosexual people have about homosexual people?
I think so. I mean, the funniest one I find is the idea that if you're a gay man, you automatically find anything else in trousers irresistible. You know, one of the things, somebody finds out that you're gay or you mention it in conversation, they go, oh, back to the wall, chaps, you know. They should be so bloody lucky. You know what I mean? The most ugliest, revolting, then... Oh, you're not getting near my trousers then. Really, no thank you. You don't, you know, one's ego demands that you should only chase somebody who's likely to fancy you. If they don't fancy you at all, what's the point? You're certainly not going to go after them.
And what about that all too common idea that homosexuals are a threat to little boys? But it is a common idea, isn't it?
Well, I love children myself. I grew up with them, you know. It's no, goodness, there are paedophiles. There are adults who are sexually interested in children. Some of them are heterosexual. And we mustn't lose sight of the fact that 95% of all sex crimes are committed by heterosexuals. It's the other 5% that we get the finger pointed at us for.
So these fears are irrational?
I think they're bloody stupid.
Tom feels angry about the prejudice that surrounds the gay community. But he has found that you can confront prejudice more easily if you're part of a group than if you're on your own. Femi found the courage to come out when, as a student, she became involved with the women's movement. She's now an active campaigner for gay rights. For her, sexuality and politics are directly linked.
Certainly, the women's movement gave me the room to be a lesbian, and I think if any woman thinks about why it's not easy for her to be a lesbian, she will see that the aims of the women's movement will encompass those faults and set them right.
But it seems to imply that a heterosexual woman can't be a feminist.
Yes, it does in a way, and in fact it does cause a lot of problems within the movement, in that I'm a more right-on feminist than you because I don't put my energy into men. How can you take all this good stuff from your sisters and then toddle off and put it back into some man? I don't hold with that theory entirely. But yes, I think it must be a little bit more difficult.
It's all right for you, some people might think. Femi sitting here talking to me, we're in London. But supposing you were in a small town in rural Yorkshire, knowing you have these confused feelings about which way you're going to go, what's it like for someone in that situation?
Well, I do know, because I do speak to a lot of young people who live in Outer Chippington and beyond on Gay Switchboard. And it is awful because not only do you have the same feeling that I had, oh God, I'm the only gay person in the whole world, I know it, but there's no publications, there's no clubs that people just sort of point their finger at and snigger at. There's no evidence. And the only advice that I can offer, the only thing that I can say is that there are organisations that offer things like pen pal services, telephone services, helplines, and they can bring people closer together in that they can say, yes, here's evidence, because look, here's a gay person on the other end of the phone, or this letter was written by someone who has feelings that you can identify with. But when it comes down to it, it's just you against your village.
But you say that you can, to try and get in touch with people like themselves, but can they know at 13, 14, 15 even?
Not only can they know, they can do it.
Yes. I mean, permanently, in a sense. I mean, you can know what you feel like at 13, 14, 15. But does that necessarily mean that's how you're going to be at 25, 35, 45?
Not necessarily. Because if you're going to put it like that, then that would negate all the 60-year-old women who have grown up, got married, had kids, and then come out as lesbian. So no, you can't necessarily, I mean, for certain, but you can know what you want to do right now. And I think individuals should have the option, you should be able to see. And my ideal is that gay people, lesbians and gay men will be more visible, so that at least they've got a choice. You know, at least you can say, well, no, I don't like the look of that one, thanks very much, I'll try over here.
Is it possible, do you think, that some young people who are in a stage just of confusion can have their confusion increased by getting involved with the gay scene? What do you think?
Yes, I think that's definitely possible, in much the same way that I had my sexuality confused by the blatant heterosexuality that was surrounding me. And everybody telling me that this is what you are and this is what you must be. But it's what you've got to remember is it's a lot harder to be gay. And so I would say it's very, very unlikely.
Why do you think parents are so terrified of finding out, or their child getting involved with someone who's gay? Because parents are, by and large, aren't they?
Yes. I think it's fear of the unknown. Again, this whole thing about, we all know what gay people are like. You know, the women are all really heavy and butch, and the men are all limp-wristed and lisp. And it's this thing about it's intrinsically wrong, that it's against nature. Then that felt pretty natural to me. I don't know that I understand, because I've become intolerant, because I've made my decision, I live my life the way I want to live it, and I surround myself with people that I want to spend time with. And so I find it very difficult to sympathise with people who are afraid.
Have you ever suffered personal abuse because you're gay?
Oh, yeah.
What sort of thing?
It's usually me, because I've behaved in a way that is considered unacceptable, in that I might have given the person I love a kiss on the cheek in the street. Or it's because I just couldn't be bothered to lie anymore and just sort of said, yeah, well, I'm a lesbian, so I don't want to know about that, thank you very much. And it takes the form of just abuse yelled at me, or subtle digs.
Have you found that some men, when they know you're lesbian, set out to, quote, cure, unquote, you?
Oh, yeah, everybody knows that all she needs is a good, you know. Yeah. Well, what's to say? I just shake my head and look away. I get so angry. The truth is I get angry and I really don't know how to deal with it, so I shake my head and smile. When really what I want to do is beat them about my head. Because I just think it's so presumptuous. How dare you? Yeah. I've made my decision. Will you respect it, please? And of course, an awful lot of men say it's a big turn on. Oh, what? A bit kinky, eh? Yeah. That's equally nauseating.
Mm-hmm. How do you see the future when you look at it, Femi? Your future?
Brighter than I've seen it for a long time. Simply because I'm not hiding, and for the most part, I don't lie. Every now and again, I lie by omission. I just don't say, because it's easier, it's less hassle. But now I have the strength that has come from other gay people to lead my life the way I want to lead it, do things I want to do.
You say you sometimes lie by omission. How do you come out? Someone told us that someone I talked to about this said that he just stopped lying.
Mm.
Is that a good way?
It can be, yes. It's quite gentle, and at least you don't sort of go and say, hello, I'm Femi and I'm a lesbian. You just don't say. My advice to a lot of people that I speak to, and certainly the way in which I did it myself, was to go out and meet other people of the type that I thought I was. And then having made that decision that I was, I made friends and learned my way around and gathered strength. So that when I stopped lying, when I said, no, I wasn't out with a boy last night, I was out with a girl, and people reacted badly, I had someone to run to and say, oh, God, I told this woman, and guess what she said? And so how do you come out? You get lots of people who are like you around you, and together, I see, you're really strong, and you can deal with whatever anybody wants to hurl at you.
Makes it more of a political statement than a personal one, then.
Well, the personal is political.
Sexuality is a vital part of our self-image, isn't it? That's why we all care about it so much. And I suppose heterosexuality is the basis of society. You know, love, marriage, children, and all that. And it's for that reason that some heterosexual people are so threatened by homosexuality. And that's why they become aggressive about it. But homosexuality is no sort of threat to any of us. People like Tom and Femi deserve better of society than they've had in the past. Not just a grudging tolerance, but an ordinary acceptance, permission to be themselves, the sort we all enjoy. Now, supposing you are one of the people who have those confused feelings that Tom and Femi talked about, don't know how to cope with your feelings, don't know where you're going. Suppose you're the parent of someone who feels like that. How are you going to get help? Well, I prepared one of my information sheets that will give you all the details you need about where you can get just the help you require.
I was a little reluctant to do the programme because I didn't want to be like there is only one of them and they bring him out on BBC television every time anybody wants to talk about the alleged problem of homosexuality. But in a way, it's old hat. But it's never old hat because there are always people who are seeing this programme for the first time and who are hearing about homosexuality for the first time, because there's always new generations coming up and there's always people getting first access to that sort of idea.
The most difficult thing is all these problems that everybody else has that I have to deal with. All their hang-ups and their prejudices and their preconceptions and misconceptions. And I have to deal with it. I feel very resentful of that.
There are ghettos in the cities, some are black and some are white. Some you see and some are hidden in the shadows of the night. All you gay women, all you gay men, come together, stand together, and each other's rights defend. All you gay women, all you gay men, come together, stand together, and each other's rights defend.
Claire Rayner is unable to enter into personal correspondence with viewers, but a free leaflet to accompany this programme is available by writing to Claire Rayner's Casebook, BBC Television, London W12 8QT. And please enclose a 12 by 9-inch stamped addressed envelope marked Choices. In a couple of minutes, the men's free programme is featured in the World Figure Skating Championships from Helsinki, and that's after the news headlines from Michael Burke.
Donald Maclean, the British diplomat who spied for the Russians, is reported to have died at his home in Moscow. He was 69 and had been suffering from cancer. Maclean defected with his fellow spy Guy Burgess in 1951, to be followed later by Kim Philby. The three formed the most important Soviet spy ring in the post-war era. Burgess died 20 years ago, but Philby is still living in Moscow. The government's considering a plan from British Steel that they should be allowed to buy a loss-making American steel plant. It would cost £100 million, but the corporation thinks that it would be a way of overcoming American import controls. The plan would mean the closure of some capacity at the Ravenscraig works in Scotland, with the loss of 2,000 jobs. The agreement being thrashed out by OPEC oil ministers in London looks certain to affect the budget next week. One result of an OPEC agreement could well be another fall in the price of North Sea oil. That may mean £1,000 million in lost revenue to the government, that much less money for tax cuts. President Reagan has asked the American Congress to approve a $110 million aid program for El Salvador. He said the war there between government forces and leftist guerrillas was not going well. But there's likely to be opposition in Congress to greater US involvement in the war. BL's Longbridge plant in Birmingham has been at a standstill after a walkout in protest at house searches by police looking for stolen car parts. And more than 4,000 men at Ford's Halewood factory on Merseyside are on strike over the sacking of a colleague. Almost 4,000 more have been laid off because of the stoppage. Britain's Jane Torvill and Christopher Dean are on course for the world title after a spectacular performance in the ice skating championships in Helsinki. 6 out of the 9 judges awarded them maximum marks for a rock and roll routine today. More on the skating in just a moment, but from the newsroom, good night.
And just a reminder that for the half hour before breakfast time, you can keep abreast of the latest news, weather and travel prospects with CFAX AM, starting at 6 o'clock. This is BBC1.
Hello. Tonight in Helsinki, the men's championship was decided. It's a title won in the recent past, of course, by John Curry and Robin Cousins. And we'll have the final free skating programme for you shortly. But first, the ice dancing, where Jane Torvill and Christopher Dean were unbeatable yesterday. And today, they were in devastating form again with their original set pattern dance.
Jane Torvill and Christopher Dean, defending world champions, skated 3 magnificent compulsory dances. And starting there,